Okay. So any questions again on dependent arising, what we mean by this concept, how... Yes, Andra. Okay. Yes, Andra. Okay. So let's talk about this idea of how does dependent arising and emptiness, how do these two phenomena kind of correlate to each other? I mean, in a very simple way, we can say that, because when we talk about the misconception that we have, which once more is not just, we use the term ignorance frequently, right? But ignorance doesn't always mean that we are thinking of things in a wrong way. Sometimes ignorance means that we just don't know at all. So I can say I have ignorance of quantum mechanics, don't know at all. So I can say I have ignorance of quantum mechanics, which I do. So I don't know anything about that. That's one way of having ignorance. But then if I fabricate what quantum mechanics is and start teaching it to everyone, well, then it's another layer of ignorance, right? It's like a misknowledge. It's not knowing things correctly, even propounding things to be different than they are. So this type of ignorance is a misknowing. It's actually looking at things that don't exist independently, don't exist intrinsically, inherently, substantially, from their own side, and it's thinking that they do exist that way. It's fabricating a false way of existing. So if we look at it in the simple terms of independent existence, which is equivalent to inherent existence, intrinsic existence, existing from its own side, having complete independent existence, then dependent arising shows that things exist dependently. Emptiness is their lack of existing independently. And it's quite simple. It doesn't really, cause any major consternation, right? This is dependent existence, which means that there cannot be independent existence. Therefore, there is the emptiness of independent existence. But these two kind of are once more sort of two sides of the same coin. It's one way of looking at things in terms of their existence, that they exist dependently. Another way of looking that they don't exist independently. This is a negation on this side. Emptiness is a negation. And I think that's what kind of freaks people out about it, is because you're realizing the absence of something. You're realizing the lack of something. So dependent arising is said to get to emptiness by virtue of showing us that things do exist in a dependent way, therefore they cannot exist in the independent way. And that's the simple mechanics of it. There's not much more involved in that. Now, why it's called the King of Reasonings, again, as we saw, is because dependent arising by virtue of saying that things exist dependently, therefore they cannot be independent, but nonetheless they don't exist utterly, they're not utterly non-existent, they do still arise. They do still have their own existence. So it keeps us from falling into the extreme of permanence, because things can't exist independently in the way that permanent mind of permanence holds to that, nor do they exist or have utter non-existence, because they still do arise. They still do arise in a very subtle way. As Lama Zopa says, it's almost as if they don't exist. Saying things are nominally existent, existing in dependence upon mere imputation, is just the slightest bit of existence that is necessary for existence, nothing more. Yeah, Patrick.
I completely get all of that, but
I'm glad to hear.
what I get confused about is when, I suppose it's a little subtle discussion about the mind that's reached full awakening. What do they call it? Now there's a name for the mind, a fully awakened mind. What's it called?
Omniscient?
Buddha nature, that's it. And then there's a debate about Buddha nature. Is it a dependent mind, or is it a non-dependent mind?
Well, first of all, the term Buddha nature, my understanding of Buddha nature, I taught him this the last time I was here, is that Buddha nature and Buddha mind are, there is the mind of a Buddha that is the full culmination or the ripening of the potential that is our Buddha nature. So they're not the same thing. One is like the seed and the other is like the full tree or something. It's a continuity. The mind that can develop into the full enlightened mind of a Buddha is what we call our Buddha nature in terms of the conventional aspect of it. The fact that it lacks inherent existence is its ultimate nature. In Tantra, the Buddha nature becomes the clear light mind, that is kind of there as the fundamental basis for all of the transformation into the state of Buddhahood. But all phenomena that are caused, which a mind is caused, whether you talk about the mind of a sentient being that is their Buddha nature or the mind of a Buddha that is the fully awakened state, is therefore dependent upon causes and conditions, certainly dependent upon parts, certainly dependent upon imputation, designation. So we can't establish any independent phenomena whatsoever. So I don't know in terms of your... But in terms of this question about Buddha mind, let's use Buddha mind as the term. What is the question then? Is there...
The question is it permanent? If it's dependent on causes and conditions, according to that logic, is it permanent?
But then we have to define what we mean by permanent. Permanent meaning unchanging moment by moment? No, this Buddha mind is not unchanging moment by moment. Is it eternal? That would be another meaning of permanence in our conventional language. Well, sure, yeah, the Buddha mind goes on forever because the Buddha mind will exist as long as there are sentient beings suffering as a, So there is a permanent aspect of the Buddha mind because even when this is maybe going beyond the scope of this course, but when you talk about Dharmakaya, the truth body of a Buddha, you can talk about the wisdom truth body of the Buddha that is the mind of that Buddha, that's fully developed, that's omniscient, that just goes on in perpetuity, manifesting in the form bodies to benefit others. But then you can also talk about the nature truth body, which is primarily discussed as the emptiness of the mind of that Buddha. And that's a permanent phenomenon, that's unchanging. Emptiness is actually an unchanging phenomenon. The emptiness of clothes peg, the emptiness of cup, the emptiness of person are all permanent phenomena, unchanging phenomena. They don't change moment by moment. But cup does, clothes peg does, person does. All those are impermanent phenomena. I don't know, did that explanation answer it? Or so if we have to take Dharmakaya, which is the mind of a Buddha in general, we can say there is the wisdom Dharmakaya, which is that mind that's omniscient that goes on, and then there is the emptiness of that mind, the nature truth body, the nature Dharmakaya. And that is a permanent phenomenon.
I sort of live with the idea that something that's impermanent can, something like a Buddha mind is changing. I read somewhere, Kish Hand mentioned that, asked somebody a question, and he answered it by saying, of course, a Buddha mind does change, but it's that, he need to explain what he was trying to say, but I understood what he was trying to say, or what he was saying.
I mean, it's an impermanent phenomenon, so it changes.
Yeah.
But it will go on in perpetuity. It doesn't cease. We need to move on to the next topic, if that's okay. Is that all right with everyone? I'm nervous about the time and wanting to make sure. Let's hold on to, if you do have these kinds of questions, let's hold on and see if there's time at the end. Or if you want to bend my ear, at some point, maybe after dinner. All right, let's go to verse. So verse 104 was introducing this idea of the kind of dependent arising. Let's read each single line of verse 105 individually. So we're going to go back to the first line there of 105. Like a banana tree, our life force is essenceless. So some people in translating use plantain. I don't know how much difference there is between a plantain and a banana. I know they look different, they're smaller, but I don't know in terms of how they grow. But a banana tree grows in the sense that it is actually a collection of leaves that all go around, no central core. That you form this whole trunk of the banana tree on the basis of a collection of stuff that would appear to be quite solid, but there's no essential core to it. So this is speaking to this being an analogy of our life force, or certainly of phenomena in general. Geshe-la describes it as the trunks of trees that contain water, such as the banana tree, regardless of how strong they may seem, are utterly without essence, in that they collapse due to the slightest condition by the force of being consumed by the water inside them. They kind of rot within. Since our life force also deteriorates due to a mere slight condition like that, it too similarly is essenceless. But of course we can see this is also an analogy for the way that things appear to be so substantial and real, but lack any real inherent essence. Let's go to the second one, the bubble. Like a bubble, our life is without essence. So some of these may sound familiar to when we recited the prayer at the beginning of the last few classes, last few days from the Diamond Cutter Sutra. Things are like a bubble, in that a water bubble appears as though it will stay at the moment. If it is merely touched by a finger and so on, though, it will be destroyed. Similarly, although on the occasion in which the conditions for our death have not been met with, our life appears as though it will stay, it too will perish due to a mere slight condition for death. Therefore, because it is not able to abide for long, it is without essence, that is, it is not established from its own side. So, again, we can sometimes take these examples and see them as evidence of impermanence, but we can also see the example as evidence of emptiness, that there's no essence that is there that we can cling to, just as a bubble appears on the basis of a collection of cells, water cells, that have formed this object that appears to be quite substantial but has no substantial entity. It's without an essence in that way. Let's go to the mist. Like mist, things dissipate when touched. So here Geshe-la says, when mist is seen from far away, it appears as though it exists. But when it is touched close up, it becomes non-existent. Similarly, when things are also not investigated and not analyzed, they seem to be really there, really existent. But when they are investigated and analyzed, like mist, when touched close up, they are objects that dissipate. And this is the thing they say about other analyses on emptiness that I don't have time to go into, like the 4-point analysis, is that the more you look for some sort of inherently, truly, really existent I, the more elusive it is, the less it's evident. It feels like it's here so strong when we start the meditation. By the time you get to the end, it's dissipated. It's completely, without any real essence. Let's go to mirage. Like a mirage, they are beautiful from a distance. So Geshe-la here says, for example, that known as a mirage, which is produced from the collection of the three, a very hot sun, pale-colored sand, and the eye consciousness of a being, during summertime, is perceived as real water. But when we arrive near to where we saw the water, we find that not even a single drop exists. Nonetheless, when it was viewed from a distance, it appeared as though it were really beautiful, and we thought, does a great river run there? So this is, just showing this idea of an illusion, that it appears to be so real as water, but there's no substantial water there. So the phenomena that are causes, conditions, and so forth are, when analyzed, also found to not be established by their own entity. But when posited as mere appearances, without being analyzed, they are objects that appear to be beautiful, as though they were really true. There are many other examples besides the ones we're looking at here. One of them that is, mirage is a pretty effective one. The one that I tend to use frequently when I teach on emptiness is a dream. That was in the Vajrakutta verse that we read, that phenomena are like a dream. Because if you think about your dreams, it's a similar type of concept, right? Everything that appears to you in a dream feels so real if you're totally caught up in the dream state. If you have some cognizance that you're dreaming, then it's a different experience. But if it's appearing to you, you even have emotions on the basis of what's appearing to you, right? You can have fear in a dream. You can have lust and desire in a dream. You can have anger in a dream. But you're basing it on an object that appears to be real. When you wake up, you know that that wasn't real in the way that it appeared. And you can see there's no basis for your emotion at all because it was all a dream. That's why the Buddha frequently uses this as how things are dream-like. They appear to be so real. They get us all caught up in them. But when we think they're beautiful, or we think they're ugly, or we think they're whatever, we impute all these characteristics, but there's nothing really substantially there. Let's go on to the fifth one. Like a reflection in a mirror, they appear to be really true. Oh, I found this on the internet. It's kind of a sad picture, I think. Looks like Amy Winehouse sometimes. Anyway, reflections are another very common one, right? I think you even brought that up, Adam, in what you were talking about, like a reflection. The first time you experience a reflection is when you're quite young. Of course, you're totally thrown away, thrown off course by this. Like, what is that that's appearing? Is that really me? Is that another person? But there's even, times as an adult, like if you're walking into a strange hotel room or something. It's not. Yeah, a hotel room that's sometimes got mirrors or some sort of arrangement of things, and you look and you think that there's another person in the room or something, and no, that's just my reflection. Even as adults, we can get fooled into this, but the reflection in a mirror is not a real person. It appears to be a real person. But of course, as adults, we get quite used to it being just a reflection. We don't think much of it. But I think it's still a very powerful analogy. So Geshe-la says, when between the collection of the two, a polished mirror and the face of a being, there is no obscuration that acts to obscure and the like, the reflection of the face falls upon the mirror. Due to this, a real face appears as though it actually exists inside the mirror, but in reality it does not. Similarly, although phenomena also appear as though they are really true, there does not exist even a mere part of the hair of a horse's tail, split into 100,000 pieces, that is established on the object. You cannot find a single particle of true or real substantial existence of anything. Then finally, the last of these six, like a cloud and fog, it seems that they will really stay. So Geshe-la says, for example, when there is an opportunity to view a great massive cloud in the sky or thick, dense fog halfway up a mountain, although the cloud or fog appear as though they will really stay for a while, they in fact vanish in an instant without trace. So again, we can see it as evidence of the impermanence, but we can also see the emptiness. Similarly, when compounded phenomena are also not investigated and not analyzed, they seem as though they will stay, but when investigated, they are objects that quickly disintegrate without staying even one instant after another. So again, any one of these can be used as an analogy to reflect on emptiness, an example. There's even a book by Jan Westerhoff called 12 Examples of Illusion, and he uses some additional ones that are taught in Vajrakutta as well as some other presentations of the Buddha. But we have these, it's useful that we have these things in our world, right? Things that appear in a way different to how they exist, because they give us a handle on this concept of emptiness, because everything that appears to us is existing in a way contrary to how it appears. How it appears is not how it exists. And this will be there in our minds until we achieve Buddhahood. The only time it disappears prior to that is when we are in the meditative equipoise on emptiness, when we have a direct realization of emptiness, and the mind and emptiness are merged like water into water. And that's what's coming up in one of the upcoming verses, is the whole idea of this and what occurs within that state of mind. Because at that time, when the mind is realizing emptiness, there's no duality whatsoever. There's no appearance of something other than that emptiness. The emptiness and the mind realizing it become one. So these six sort of analogies or examples that show how things exist upon ultimate analysis, that they lack any inherent existence, that they are empty, is kind of a nice complement to what we looked at in the previous verse in regard to dependent relations, dependent arising. So let's go on to verse 106, and then we'll again keep going till we get to the end and hold back your questions, but do write them down if you don't want to forget them. The enemy, the self, and the executioner are also like that. They seem to really exist, yet have never been experienced to exist. They seem to be really true, yet are never experienced to be true at all. They seem to really appear, yet have passed beyond being objects of superimposition and deprecation. So here it's kind of interesting. They say, of course, even our mistaken ideas are not inherently existent. Of course, that's why they can be removed, right? If they were inherently existent, we would always have self-grasping, always have self-cherishing. But the enemy, the self-grasping, and the executioner, self-cherishing, are also like that. They also seem to truly exist, to exist from their own side, yet they have never been experienced to exist in that way, by the mind analyzing their ultimate existence. They seem to be really true, yet are never experienced to be true at all. True meaning that they exist in the way that they appear. A true phenomenon would exist in the way that it appears. So to the mind knowing emptiness directly that I was just talking about, emptiness and how it is appearing and how it exists are in alignment. That's why we can say it's ultimate truth. It is showing ultimately that phenomenon does exist in the way that it appears, which is complete emptiness of inherent existence. Everything else that we experience, though, lacks that truth. All these delusions we have in our mind, all the mistaken conceptualizations appear to be really true, but they have no real truth at all. They seem to really appear, yet have passed beyond being objects of superimposition and deprecation. For this one, Geshe-la says, because of that, ultimately all phenomena have passed beyond being objects of superimposition and deprecation, whereby they are objects that are free from superimposition of that which is to be superimposed, or we would say, deprecation of that which would be deprecated. So if we look at these two extremes, they are superimposition and deprecation. Superimposing a level of existence that isn't there, that's the extreme of permanence. Deprecating the level of mere existence that is there, which would be mere conventional existence. That's, the extreme of annihilation. So this verse was just simply to tell us that even the enemies themselves that we are combating lack any inherent existence. And of course, even emptiness itself lacks any inherent existence. So let's go to the next. By the way, that verse was on the quiz that we just went through. Let's just read this first line of verse 107. Given that, what wheel of actions exists? This being the case, Geshe-la says, since the main causes that compel us to circle in cyclic existence, namely self-grasping, self-cherishing, and so forth, are not truly established, they're not inherently existent, we might ask, apart from being mere appearances, what actions and afflictions produced by self-grasping and self-cherishing, and what circling like a wheel in the abodes of existence as a result of their power, that is, what experience of suffering, exist established from their own side? The answer, of course, is that they do not. So we once more come to the conclusion that everything within samsara, the entire wheel of existence, the actions that drive that, the afflictions that drive the actions, the beings who are in that, every single component of samsara and nirvana lack inherent existence. There is nothing established from its own side. Let's go to the remaining 4 lines then this is a 5-line verse as well, this one, 107. Here, even if they lack such inherent existence, just as the moon disk appears in water, actions and results are arrayed as a multitude of falsities. For mercy's sake, adopt and discard these mere appearances. So this is, of course, the crux of what we have to get to in our understanding of emptiness and, both conventional truth and ultimate truth, is that they complement each other, that we actually can still maintain the validity of cause and effect and of all of what the Buddha teaches that exists conventionally in the sphere of everything lacking inherent existence. That the emptiness of things in no way negates their functionality, nor does it negate their existence at all, because they exist, just not truly, inherently. So this verse says, Dharmarakshita is saying, even if they lack such inherent existence in the way that a moon disk appearing in the water, like the reflection of the moon in the sky on the still lake in front of us, appears to be a real moon, it can have that appearance. In the same way, actions and results are arrayed as a multitude of falsities. They appear, they don't exist in the way that they appear, but nonetheless they appear, nonetheless they arise. So the Buddha never negated cause and effect, never negated actions, never negated anything that was taught as a conventionality. Just negated it existing in the way that it appears, negated it existing inherently. So the final line is, then for mercy's sake, adopt these mere appearances that are virtue, discard the mere appearances that are non-virtue. They're all mere appearances, but they still need to be adopted and discarded. This is not a nihilistic path. This is not where we say, oh, everything is empty, therefore I don't need to pay attention to what I do, therefore I don't have to worry about karma, therefore I don't have to worry about my rebirth, because it's all empty. It doesn't exist. Well, no, it does exist as a mere appearance. It doesn't exist in the way it appears as intrinsically or inherently existing, but it does exist as a mere appearance through the force of these factors of dependent arising, in the end existing merely through designation. So here is where I actually had that quote, about for them to whom emptiness makes sense, everything makes sense. For them to whom emptiness does not make sense, nothing makes sense. The only way that things do make sense, that cause and effect can be upheld, is within the space of emptiness. Otherwise, nothing could change. This would be inherently a book and could never become anything other than that. We know it can become if we were hard up for something in the winter to burn for a fire. We might need to use the pages of this to transform into the kindling for fire. And we know that this was something prior to becoming the book. It was, the pulp of the wood and so on, and everything else that was involved in making the book. None of this could arise if it was inherently a book. The book couldn't even arise from causes and conditions if it was inherently a book. It couldn't give rise to future results if it was an inherently existent book. So everything is a mere appearance existing in that very, very subtle way. Again, I said this earlier, but Rinpoche says it's almost as if things don't exist. The teaching assistant in the master's program, Jampa Gendon, he said, Lama Yeshe said once, that because Westerners, at least his experience with Westerners, that we were clinging so tightly to reality, he said we should just head for the nihilistic, cliff and then pull it back just a little bit, aim for nihilism, and then just say, oh, but the things exist in this very, very slight way. Like I said, there's just nominal existence. That, we haven't applied this to the self, to the I yet. We've been using, this term self-grasping. But if we apply it to the I, it means that there is just a mere I here, meaning there's only the label, the thought of I on the basis of this collection of stuff. Because there's nothing that is the real I in this collection of stuff. You can go searching for it from head to toe and everything in between and every aspect and corner of the mind, and you find nothing that is the equivalent of that I, that is the direct referent of that inherently existent I. In that way, you negate it. You do not find it. So how does the I exist? Simply because we think of this as I. As Lama Zopa says, the only reason why I can say I am sitting on the cushion is because the body and mind are on the cushion. They're the basis for the I, just like this is the basis for the clothespin. But there's no real I here. I is just the thought I have in relation to this, the designation in relation to this, and that's enough. That's sufficient for existence. That's the way things have always existed. It's not like when we suddenly realize this, that suddenly things exist that way now. No, they've always existed that way, and they function perfectly fine. This is just our understanding of it that needs to be created. Let's go on to verse 108. Just as when a peat fire blazes as an object in a dream, even though it does not exist inherently, we are frightened by its heat. Likewise, although the hell realm and so forth do not exist inherently, frightened of the mass of sufferings of being boiled and burnt, we should abandon them. So here comes in the dream analogy that I mentioned earlier. So we might have something like a huge fire blazing as an object in our dream, and there's no real fire there in our dream state, but we might be frightened by the heat. Likewise, although the heat of the hell realm, the fires that burn there and so on, do not exist inherently, we are frightened of the massive sufferings of being boiled and burnt, and so we should abandon them. I mean, this all can still be upheld. The conventional reality of what we call hell, and the fires of hell, and the beings in hell, and the suffering that we experience in hell, it all exists. It just doesn't exist inherently. It doesn't exist truly. Therefore, we have to pay attention to these actions that are mere appearances, and the minds that are mere appearances, and all the various things that are mere appearances, but nonetheless have their results. Okay, 109. Just as when, even though there is absolutely no darkness, delirious with fever, it is as though we were roaming about and suffocating in a deep cave. Likewise, although ignorance and the collection do not exist inherently, we should eliminate this error by means of the three wisdoms. So this is an example of someone who's like kind of tormented by fever and becomes kind of delirious in their illness. Maybe, again, some of you in the room have had these kinds of experiences of hallucinations or feelings of appearances of being places that you're not, or whatever. All of this kind of arising as an appearance within the condition of that fever, that fevered mind. Similarly, when the eyesight initially diminishes, Geshe-la says, even in people like ourselves who have obscured eyes, although in reality there does not exist even the slightest smoke, from our perspective the appearance of a lot of suffocating smoke arises. Like this, although the collection of afflictions in general, and in particular, are in reality not inherently established, conventionally they act to produce many bad actions. So, if you were having this kind of vision of suffocating in a deep cave with all this darkness or smoke or whatever, it doesn't have any real inherent existence. It's just a factor of the mind that is delirious with fever. Similarly, our ignorance, all of the collection of the sufferings and actions and so on that arise, all of this lacks inherent existence. It doesn't exist in reality in the way we think it does. But nonetheless, it still does exist, and we should eliminate this error that holds to them as truly existent by means of the three wisdoms. We talked about the three wisdoms previously: hearing, thinking, meditation, or what we might even call, in some contexts it's called intellectual, conceptual, and non-conceptual. So at the level of the first, just hearing it, it's fairly intellectual, and then it becomes a bit more integrated into our thinking and is conceptual. Then eventually it becomes, through the force of meditation, non-conceptual. And that's when we know emptiness at that level where it begins to remove this ignorance, this self-grasping at a much deeper level. So this is the example that was used here of under the control of a fever. So we get some more examples. Here, the example of music, verse 110. When a musician plays a song on a lute, the sounds, if analyzed, do not in fact exist inherently. But when not analyzed, the arisal of pleasant sounds by means of the collection dispels the anguish in the minds of beings. So we can find music to be quite soothing in the midst of it not having any inherent existence, that it is just these sounds that are arising based on their causes and conditions that are being merely imputed, designated as music and so on. They lack any inherent existence. I sometimes use music as a good example for looking at the lack of inherent existence of qualities and things in it, because we all wouldn't say everyone in the room likes different music. Some of us may like similar music, but we all have our own musical tastes, right? Things that we would put on if we were to have an evening at home relaxing or something. And that's the music that we really like. And we think that there's something really inherently wonderful about that music. And we can't understand why everybody doesn't like the same music that we do, right? Why don't they hear? You might play it for a friend, and you go, this is the most beautiful piece of music I've ever heard. And then they go, it's okay. And you go, what's wrong with you? Because we think it's inherently beautiful, right? It soothes us. It gives us that wonderful feeling. But it's all just a karmic appearance, We have that particular karma with that type of music, that we hear it and it appears in that form for us. We have an equal karmic appearance with the music we can't stand, right? You hear somebody driving by, playing it really loud, and you go, God, how do they listen to that, How can they like that? But they're having the mind that we're having when we're sitting and listening to our delightful music, right? It's the same mind, but they have a different object of that. So we can see that there's no inherent qualities to the music at all. It's not inherently beautiful, inherently wonderful, inherently this or that. It's not even inherently music. It's a combination of notes produced through a variety of causes and conditions that are structured by our minds into music, and this is what we call music. Identify it through our own designation. So when a musician plays a song on a lute, if we analyze the sounds, they don't have any inherent existence. They don't have any inherent qualities, they don't have any inherent identity within them. This is all the identity we give to them, right? I mean, that's why I find it, I don't know that much about modern music, but I know that, there was a huge movement away from kind of the traditional scales that were used in the 20th century to like these abnormal scales that like Schoenberg and all these people used, right? And most people found this music really distressing because it was like taking them out of a realm of, what they were used to hearing. But, it speaks once more to, there's nothing that exists inherently. There's nothing from the side of that music that makes it one thing or another. It's all our own karmic appearance. But nonetheless, when we don't analyze it, when we simply just put on the music and we play it, well, it certainly can soothe us. It can cause us to have, a dispelling of the anguish in our own minds. Music is very powerful in that way. It can still function, even though it lacks inherent existence, is the point that's being made here. Yeah.
Can I ask a very quick question?
Yeah.
Line 3,
Mm-hmm.
could that be, whether it's analysed or not, the arousal of pleasant sounds dispels anguish?
When analyzed or not, I think that would be fine. Yeah. Is your thinking that...
It's a really important point for me that,
Uh-huh.
born of attachment, that even when you do understand the emptiness of something like music, you're still going to experience pleasure from it. And it's like Lama Yeshe being asked what's the goal of life, and he
Right.
says bliss, and bites into a peach, and every indication is he knew that peach was completely empty, but he was still
Right.
getting the bliss from it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make. I mean, and we can say that's part of that, what's being implied by it dispelling the anguish. And so I think there's no problem with inserting that in there and saying whether analyzed or not, it still functions in the way that it does because it's a conventional phenomenon that serves that purpose. Now, what we might even say, though, is that if we go to the level of Buddhahood, somebody who's completely removed any of that faulty conception that would be involved at all, they would hear the music that some people despise and the music that some people like and have the same experience of bliss regardless, Exactly. I mean, to them, their mind has already transcended those kinds of conditioned experiences. But for ourselves, as we kind of move along the path and we're just working with our coarser analysis of these things, it doesn't deny that they produce pleasurable effects. It doesn't deny that they play some role in our conventional experience. And in fact, yeah, I think, again, Lama Yeshe and many of these teachers say that we're really missing out on the pleasure of things because of our deluded states. And if we actually remove so much of the ignorance, we experience them much more purely and intensely because we're not getting caught up in those habitual patterns. So, yeah. Let's move forward to 111. Similarly, when actions as well as causes and results are analyzed in their entirety, although they are not inherently one and not inherently different, phenomena are produced and disintegrate as though really appearing, and the various happinesses and sufferings are experienced as though really existing. And then there's a final line on the next slide. For mercy's sake, adopt and discard these mere appearances. So this is a repetition of what we saw a few verses back. Let's go back to the previous slide just to talk about these 4 lines. So when you have kind of this, this comparison to the lute music and all of that we, just talked about, in the same way, all of our actions, as well as all the causes and results, everything involved in the whole confluence of causes and conditions, when they are, analyzed in their entirety, although they aren't inherently one, meaning inherently the same or inherently different from their basis, phenomena are produced and disintegrate as though really appearing, and the various happinesses and sufferings are experienced as though really existing. It's like everything flows just fine. Everything happens within the space of emptiness. It's not like emptiness, again, negates that all this is going on. It is the undercurrent in which all of this is arising. Functionality is never denied. And that's why, once more, the admonition at the very end, for mercy's sake then, adopt virtue and discard non-virtue, even though they're mere appearances. Because mere appearances still function. Just like even the reflection of a face in the mirror still functions as a reflection, right? It's not a real face. You can't, say, I'd like some plastic surgery on my reflection of a face, and take your reflection into the doctor and have them, alter all of your features or something. It's not a real face. It's just a reflection of a face. But it serves quite well to show us, where the blemishes are, or where the wrinkles are, or whatever's going on, right? Okay. Number 112. When drops of water fill a vase, the vase is not filled by the first drop, nor is it filled by the individual drops, the last, and so on. Rather, the vase is filled by the collection of dependent relations. I should have said vase, right? Vase. I loved when we had Venerable Angie living at the center, because she would pronounce words differently. And I go, oh, that's right. That's how they pronounce that word in another country. So the Geshe says for this one, for example, even if a vase is completely filled by many drops of water, the vase cannot be filled by the first drop of water alone. Likewise, it is not also filled by the individual drops of water, ranging from the second, third, and so forth, all the way through to the last. Nonetheless, when all the dependent relations of the first drop of water through to the last drop of water are collected, the vase is filled with water. I mean, it's just kind of saying that cause and effect still works just fine. I mean, everything just functions. Drop by drop, things get filled. Moment by moment, things happen. In no way is conventional phenomena ever going to be negated. We're just going to simply, see these things coming to their fruition. So this is the example, just like the lute. Now we're going to look at what it is being compared to. The next verse, 113. Similarly, whenever anyone experiences the results of happiness and suffering, it is not due to the first instant of the cause, nor is it due to the last instant, and so forth. Rather, due to the collection of dependent relations, happiness and suffering are experienced. For mercy's sake, adopt and discard these mere appearances. So it kind of really wants to give us that admonition in regard to this. So similarly, when we have these various experiences of happiness and suffering that we have in our lives, the karmic results of our own actions, they're not produced by the first instant of the cause, that action that we did, nor are they also produced by the second, the third, the fourth. They're produced by they're the effect of all of that whole process and everything else involved in the whole chain of dependent related causes and conditions that have all amassed together to produce that result, in the same way that each of those individual drops produce the full vase, the full bucket of water. Okay? 114. Oh, this appearance, which is joyous, when left alone without investigation, is indeed without essence. Nonetheless, this phenomenon that appears as though it exists is profound and difficult for the inferior to see. So Geshe says, for this reason, everything we've just been looking at, we say, oh, having seen the way in which the two, appearance and emptiness, dawn without contradiction to be a source of very great amazement. So again, if we acknowledge that there are these mere appearances, what we are calling our dependent arisings, that come into existence, go out of existence, change within their existence, all of these various things, and there is emptiness, the lack of inherent existence or independent existence of those, that if we just sort of leave them as they are without investigation, it's miraculous, it's wonderful. He says here, when the phenomena that are dependent relations are left alone, that is, left in their natural state without investigation and without analysis, they can dawn as various phenomena, whereby we think it's joyous, it's wonderful. It's just like we are part of this whole flow of all of this happening, all of these various causes and conditions, things arising, falling, mere appearances within the space of emptiness. Then in the second part, he says, with respect to those appearances, there is no essence that is inherently established, not even a mere part of the hair of a horsetail split into 100,000 pieces. This is Geshe-la's way of saying, not even an atom of inherent existence. Even though this is the case, it should be understood that from the perspective of those polluted by self-grasping, phenomena appear as though they exist inherently. These phenomena are both empty and dependent relations. One phenomenon helps another and one carries another. This, in fact, is much more profound than even the profound, due to which it is difficult for the inferior to see, that is, those who hold views that are not at the level of this consequence middle way point of view. So these phenomena still appear as though they exist in this way, but we have to be able to discern the reality of their existence to develop that deep and profound view that is the lack of inherent existence of all things. I'm going to share just 2 verses from Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom, in the same chapter as that one about things not making sense or making sense. That which is dependent origination is explained to be emptiness. That, being a dependent designation, is itself the middle way. This is the way that we establish things, is that they lack any inherent existence, so they cannot be in that extreme of permanence, and they arise in dependence upon various factors. They are arising and existing, so they don't utterly lack existence. So we establish the middle way, this fine line between the 2 extremes. And then Nagarjuna says, there does not exist anything that is not dependently arisen. Again, not everything has causes and conditions, but everything has parts, and everything has a label that is or a basis that is designated on the by a conceptual awareness. To be a particular phenomenon. So there does not exist anything that is not dependently arisen. Therefore, there does not exist anything that is not empty. These 2 are equivalent. I've been at some teachings where some Tibetan lamas have actually said that dependent arising is emptiness. Emptiness is dependent arising. I think we still have to make sure, again, that we don't conflate the 2 in some misunderstanding, but to really get what we mean by dependent arising as the mode of existence of things in this very, very slight conventional way, and their lack of inherent existence, which is their emptiness, that these 2 truths, the conventional truth and the ultimate truth, are distinguishable by our conceptual mind, but nonetheless inextricably bound up in any phenomenon. That's why in the Heart Sutra we say form is emptiness, emptiness is form. We're not saying that they are identical, but we are saying that you can't have one without the other. If you've got a phenomenon that exists through dependent arising, then you have its emptiness. When you have its emptiness, you have its dependent origination. You cannot split these 2 out in terms of completely separate phenomena, but they are yet distinguishable through our conceptual mind as distinct, as 2 different points of view. All right, let's go on then to the next one, which is getting us there. We've only got 3 more verses left. This one is on the quiz, the first 2 lines, just so you know. Now, when absorbed in equipoise by means of meditative stabilization, how can even mere appearances definitely exist? Furthermore, how can the existent and the non-existent also exist? How can anyone anywhere assert there is and there is not? So these last 2 lines might require a bit more explanation. I didn't put them on the quiz because they're a little more, there's different presentations of them too, and I'll try to give you at least the one that I think is, the one that I'll see when I get to that. Let's read the first part. The commentary on the first part says, thus, having finished settling the meaning of emptiness excellently, after that we should absorb in equipoise. By equipoise we mean a meditative session where we are able to perceive emptiness non-conceptually. And that will be by means of meditative stabilization, by a very stable, undistracted mind. That is, he says, by means of focusing the mind single-pointedly on that very meaning of emptiness. At that time, in the perspective of the appearance of that meditative equipoise, the mind that is in that meditative equipoise, all conventional appearances are averted. Nothing that is a conventionally existent phenomenon appears. whereby even mere appearances definitely do not exist. Because as I said, to that mind that is absorbed in emptiness and meditative equipoise, the object of emptiness is now known directly, and it fuses, in a sense, with the mind that is realizing it. No differentiation of subject and object. This experience is what begins our process of removing these obscurations, the afflictive obscurations first, and then eventually the cognitive obscurations. So this is what's going on in meditative equipoise. What Geshe-la says, and I'll read his commentary in terms of how to interpret the next two lines, the last two here, is he talks about it in the space of that meditative equipoise, and what that meditative equipoise has appearing to it. So he says, how can the existent exist? That part of it says, furthermore, how can the existent and the non-existent also exist? So first part, how can the existent exist, means the following. From the point of view of that meditative equipoise that is absorbed on emptiness, to say how can the existent exist means, in the perspective of that meditative equipoise, how can conventional appearances exist? So he kind of reiterates what was said just above. You cannot have conventional appearances because the mind is absorbed in emptiness. There's nothing conventional appearing, only emptiness. In the perspective, then to say, how can the non-existent exist? That's the second part of that third line, right? How can the non-existent exist means, in the perspective of that meditative equipoise, the emptiness that is the ultimate truth is not non-existent. Again, it gets kind of hard to twist your head around these knots. It is not non-existent. So how can the non-existent exist? He interprets as how that it is not non-existent. So I have a harder time with his interpretation than Geshe Choni's from Singapore. So I'll maybe go to that in a moment. And then he goes to the last line where it says, how can anyone anywhere assert there is and there is not? Similarly, in the perspective of that meditative equipoise, how can anyone anywhere also assert that there is or there is not true establishment and so forth? Such an assertion also does not exist even as slightest. Why? Because it's a conventional phenomenon. So in the space of this mind realizing emptiness, we cannot say conventional appearances exist. We cannot deny the existence of emptiness because it does exist, nor can we uphold any other views of there is this or there is that, because those are conventional appearances too. That's his way of explaining it. Again, it works at some level, but let me explain how Geshe Choni talks about this, because I found it quite easier to understand it at some level. Is that, first of all, we cannot say that true existence exists. So when it says there, how can the existent exist? This is shorthand for true existence. Sometimes we do this, right, where we just say things exist, meaning that they exist inherently or truly. So we cannot assert that the existent exists in the space of recognizing emptiness, seeing emptiness. We also cannot have the non-existent exist, which would be utter non-existence of mere conventionalities, that nihilistic view. We can't say that that exists, that the non-existence of phenomena exists. And then when it comes to there is and there is not, we cannot say there is true existence, therefore, and we cannot say there is not mere existence. So he refers it to these two types of existences, saying we cannot uphold true existence, we cannot deny mere existence, therefore, in the space of that, we cannot say there is true existence, nor there is not mere existence. Did I confuse everybody with all these words? It's all on tape. You can go back and listen to it, but Geshe Choni's commentary to me made a little bit more sense because it got into what we were talking about, the two different modes of existence. We cannot say that true existence exists in the space of that because it's being negated. We also cannot say that mere existence doesn't exist, because mere existence can be upheld in the view of emptiness, because it's merely arising through causes and conditions, imputation, and so on, all of that. Anyway. Okay, we are getting close to the end here, right? We've got verse 115, by the way, was the one that we just went to, was said to be about mind being empty of inherent existence. The object is mind, in that we are talking about the mind of meditative equipoise. Meditative equipoise is a mind. It's a mind in meditation on emptiness. So in that way, we are saying not only do all these other phenomena not exist inherently, but also mind does not exist inherently. It cannot exist truly, cannot exist from its own side. So let's go to the last verse that has to do with ultimate bodhicitta, which is 116, and this is talking about the indivisibility of appearances and the mind. Objects and the reality of objects do not exist. And if we abide quietly, without contrived intelligence, in the primordial state that is free from all adopting and discarding, and free from elaboration, we will become great beings. So what's interesting in this verse is that Thupten Jinpa includes subjects in this first line. He says, objects, subjects, and the reality of objects do not exist. So we would say kind of the objects that are known by consciousness, subjects, the consciousness themselves, nor the reality of these. I think he actually says the reality of these. This is what he says. I wrote it down here. There is no object, no subject, nor no ultimate nature. So we see that he's saying, there is no inherently existent object, there is no inherently existent subject, mind, nor is there inherently existent ultimate nature itself. Emptiness itself is not inherently existent. If we abide quietly without contrived intelligence, meaning kind of a natural, uncontrived awareness, one that is kind of illuminated and looking at emptiness, observing it, in the primordial state that is free from all adopting and discarding, meaning taking on views or superimpositions, all of that, elaborations as we've talked about previously, all of this stuff that our mind of ignorance is doing, free from all of that, free from adopting all views, all conventional elaborations, then we will become great beings if we actually abide in that state. And of course, that's what we see when we go back to the path, is that you start with the path of seeing, where you have your initial direct realization, and then you continue to go back to that state of realizing emptiness with greater and greater strength, eventually removing all of the obscurations and eventually becoming a Buddha. So let me read the rest of Thupten Jinpa's translation. He says, there is no object, no subject, nor no ultimate nature, free of all ethical norms and conceptual elaborations. If I abide naturally with this uncontrived awareness in the ever-present innate state, I will become a great being. Meaning, of course, we will realize emptiness directly, and we will eventually remove all of these obscurations and become a Buddha. So let me see if there's questions on this whole section on ultimate nature. It's already 5 o'clock, but yeah, Abelardo.
I have a question about how does a bodhisattva that has attained pathway of seeing and is meditating on emptiness, when it's not when he or she is not meditating on emptiness,
right,
how does that being see conventional reality?
While they are in meditation?
No, while they are not in meditation.
Not in meditation.
How does...
Correct, okay. That's a good question. The teachings I had in Italy, essentially they say that when you come up out of that meditative equipoise in what's called subsequent attainment, it's like the time between your meditative sessions. Of course, conventional reality appears to you, as I mentioned, it will appear to be inherently existent. So everything seems to still be imbued with a false way of appearing. But you no longer have any conviction in that because you have seen the truth of things. So what they say is that you don't have any belief in it whatsoever. It's like it would be comparable to the person who is in the dream, who's completely lucid dreaming. They know that everything that is appearing to them as if it were real is actually a dream object. So they no longer get caught up in any of the emotions or any of the actions that would be in response to those things that they would normally have, because they see them as appearances, mere appearances.
But paradoxically, it's more kind of closer to reality. So,
yeah.
But for us, it's closer to
fiction.
Well, not fiction, but illusion. But
yeah.
Would that mean it's closer to what reality is?
Exactly. They see it as like an illusion. It's something that appears to be real but is not. So they no longer have any conviction in those appearances at all. They see them for what they are. So the bodhisattva then, or even they say the hearers or solitary realize emptiness directly, don't get caught up in phenomena in that way. They don't exacerbate their own suffering by generating more affliction and delusion because they know that it isn't real in the way that it appears. They've seen that truth. So in this way, until they completely remove it, they won't have and that would be only done by bodhisattvas when they become Buddhas. They wouldn't have, at that point, they no longer have the appearance of inherent existence. But nonetheless, because they know it doesn't exist in the way that it appears, just like the person who's lucidly dreaming knows that those dream objects don't exist in the way that they appear, there's no reaction. There's no need to do anything because there's no fear, there's no... Should we finish this off? I think you're all finished off already. Well, especially all of you who've been here all weekend, so let's read this final verse 117 together. Whoops, we had a little advice here. Let's come back to that. Go ahead and go to 117. In this way, by practicing the conventional mind of enlightenment and the ultimate mind of enlightenment, may we culminate the two collections without interference, and then bring the two welfares, our own and others, to perfection. So again, we see that this is that dual track that we've been talking about, practicing conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Through these two, may we culminate the two collections, the collection of merit, the collection of wisdom, without any interference, and then bring the two welfares, our own welfare, that is the culmination in the truth body, the Dharmakaya, and the welfare of others, which is culminated in the form body, all the way to perfection. So this is just this dedication prayer at the very end, this verse of dedication to show what it is that we want all of our efforts to be directed towards. So go back to maybe that quickly to what Geshe Ngawang Dargye says. Such greatness can be achieved, but generally we lack enthusiastic perseverance. Our present deplorable condition of helplessness, both to ourselves and others, comes from our lack of effort in generating the two kinds of bodhicitta. The Buddhists had this perseverance, we don't. I wasn't trying to beat everybody up by putting this up there. I just think that it's important that we understand this, that the only difference between ourselves and Buddhists is that they had the effort and the stamina and the perseverance to do this work. So Geshe Ngawang Dargye was trying to just point that out with some compassion for us and understanding that if we have that impetus to actually realize these things, it'll happen for us too. There's no doubt. We have the same potential as the Buddhists. So let's go forward. There's a few dedication verses that I've added right after 117. These are actually some interesting lines of dedication from Thupten Chodron's book, Good Karma. So let's recite these together as a way of dedicating the positive potential from today and from this course. May we always have a sense of gratitude for the Buddha and all these sages who learned, practiced, realized, and taught the thought training teachings, and may we pay it forward by practicing them well and sharing them with others. May all the merit we create by our study and practice ripen in the long lives and good health of our Dharma teachers. May they compassionately teach and guide us until samsara ends. May the Dharma exist in pure forms forever, and may practitioners everywhere be harmonious and mutually support each other. May each sentient being attain the full awakening of a Buddha. So hold those strong thoughts of dedication. You also might dedicate for those that you're holding in your heart right now, beings who are experiencing obstacles or illness, who are dying or who have died. And we certainly can also dedicate very strongly for the success of Jamyang Buddhist Centre here, all of its members, that all the conditions conducive to the stability and growth of the center may fall into place, that the center may continue to provide the precious Mahayana Dharma to the people of London and environs, that there will be every success in every project and effort of this center and organization. So just kind of share this energy with that cause as well as all the other beings that you're holding in your heart right now. Thank you all so much. We had a really, really good time teaching.
Just got a gift from Jamyang. Thank you so much for teaching us the last 3 days. It's been so clear, and for those in the basic program, it's just been really, really helpful. And so thank you. And I've already asked you if you're going to come back. Haven't we? Until 2021 is your earliest day. So please come back, and please come back as soon as you can.
Thank you. Thank you, Francesca. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Radha. So I do want to say, those of you who would like to do the quizzes or the exam from this, I didn't send out the files with the exam stuff. I'm not sure if Mike did. I don't know if he did. He did. Those of you who got the other files, or if you still need files, give me your email address. But if you want the exam file, how the exam is run, just so you really, really quickly, because I think it's kind of important just to diffuse any anxiety you might have about an exam, is that there are 12 quizzes. They were the 12 sections I was going through, and I pointed out frequently where there were quizzes, various verses or ideas. You can go through, you're being given not just the quizzes, but the quiz answers. So you have all of those answers that you can look at and review. And then when you get ready, for the exam, well, the exam is only going to be a small portion of those questions. And I give you those on a sheet. You can identify which of the quiz questions you have to study. And then when you actually decide to take the exam, there's a file that you open up, and you can have the one file that has the verses, because there's many verses that are included. You have those in front of you, and you simply write out or type out on your computer the answers to certain questions. You won't have to answer all of them. You have to do 20 points, and they're essentially different point categories for different questions, and then you do 2 of this category, 3 of this category, whatever. It's very, very straightforward, and I think relatively easy. The big thing for those who are taking the basic program, of course, is to do the 3-month review and the final exam that covers the entire corpus of all of these, basic program subjects. So, that's where you would actually perhaps see different things that are going to be what you need to study. But for my exam, if you want to do some of that review and do that, feel free to communicate with me. My email address is Don Handrick, all one word. That's with an A. A lot of people spell Handrick with an E. So DonHandrick @yahoo.com. And just communicate with me there if you want to send things to me. If you want me to review your exam, I'm happy to do that. If you didn't get some files, if you didn't get the exam files, you can write to me there. And I'm happy to help out. So, okay. All right. We're not doing a group photo then, right?